morning. I hope everyone had a nice Shabbos. We are Nun Zayin Amid Beis at the bottom. The Mishnah had listed various things that a woman may not wear in the street as an adornment, as jewelry, because she may take it off to show someone, or she may take it off for mikveh, and come to carry it, Dalad Amas and Rosh Hashanah. She may carry it for 4 Amas. And the Gemara had asked, what is the Kollel that is mentioned in the Mishnah, and gave 2 options. One is that it is a sort of a signet ring, of badge, as it were, that slave would wear, or it's a type of it's a part of the cap that a woman would wear, and they wore different parts and different layers on top of the head, some sort of netting, and then a turban. And what is this? And the first man, the Amar, said that Rabbi Abahu said that it's talking about the cap of the woman, and that's prohibited. And we brought that that a Kollel and an istama are going to be aser. So up to the third to last line of Nun Zayin Amud Beis, the Gemara asks, "My istama, what is this istama?" Amar Rabbi Abahu bizyoni, my bizyoni. So what is that? Amar Abaye Amarav kalya pruchi. It is what holds back the free-flying hair. So after a woman has already made a turban up and wrapped her hair under her head, under her hat, then some of the loose hairs, baby hairs, will come out. And so they had another kerchief-like band that would pull in those hairs into the hat, into the head cover. That's the kalya pruchi. So the Gemara is going to tell us 3 halachas about the kalya pruchi, about these excess hairs that would fall out of the head covering, the turban or the hat, and this kerchief or this band that was used to pull it back up. Now, this band was not a woven band, but rather was made sort of pressed fibers together, and therefore it has 3 halachas. We have 3 halachas about this. If it's made of pressed wool and pressed linen together, but it's not woven, it's not going to have the halacha of shatnez. And it's not going to, as well, since it's not a beged, since it's not actually a garment that's woven, it's not going to be susceptible to tumah of a nega, which needs a beged. And you also cannot wear this in the public domain because you can take it off. And Rabbi Shimon says that also it is not really such a beautiful item, and as such, the prohibition that we see in the Gemara and Sotah that says that after the Churban, certain head adornments were prohibited on account of commemoration of the destruction, that we should have tsar and not full joy. This would not be included, even if you had a nice one, would not be included in that prohibition. In any case, so in this first pshat, it's the kavla, and included in that would be this istama, which is this band that would hold the excess hairs that fell out of the head covering and pull it back in. However, Shmuel says that no, really what we're talking about is the band for the eved. Shmuel Amar Kavla de Avda, that it is this badge or this ring around the neck that's made for an eved to show that he is an eved. So just a couple of things about it, because the Gemara is going to go through it, and it's important to know the all of the details here. So they would make this badge to show that someone was a slave. He would either wear it, it was either made of clay or of metal, and we'll see different halachas depending on whether it was made of clay or metal. Clay, obviously, much more breakable, and once it breaks, it's useless. Metal, much more difficult to break and has value even after it's broken. And sometimes it was made up on the neck, and sometimes it was on the garment as a part, as sort of an attachment, a badge on the garment. And sometimes, even if the master, the owner, did not require his eved to wear such a badge, the eved himself may do so. And the Meir explains the reason why one would do that is if they were if they worked in a prominent place and they were going to the marketplace to purchase, they wanted to be taken seriously, so they would make their own badge of their family that they worked for, so that they would be taken seriously, or if it came to taxes and other commerce issues. So sometimes they would make it for themselves, but there, obviously, they wouldn't be afraid to take it off because they're not required to wear it. So the Gemara is going to make all these distinctions. So Tanan, we learned. Umi Omar Shmuel Hachi, second line of Nun Ches Amar Aleph. Umi Omar Shmuel Hachi, that Shmuel really say that the kavla, which is not allowed to be worn, is talking about a slave's badge. But Shmuel made a different distinction. He said that a neck ring that the Eved wears, he's allowed to go out with, but not with the one on his garment. So Gemara says, look, Kasha, that's not a contradiction. It depends whether he made it for himself or his master made it for him. If his master made it for him, he's going to be afraid to walk around without it, and the concern is that he's going to carry it. If he made it for himself, if it breaks, it falls off, he takes it off, it's not going to be a problem. Or vice versa, that the one he made himself, he may take it off and then carry it. The one his master has, he's going to keep on. So we'll see the various differences. But Maya came to Allah the Shmuel. So how did you define Shmuel's interpretation? The Avid Le Rabbi is the master made it for him. So then why, when it's on his garment, why can't he wear? Why may he not wear this badge that is on his garment that his master made for him? He wouldn't take it off. So Gemara says, no, Dilmi Mifsek. Maybe it's going to break. Umir Tas, and he's afraid that to walk around without any badge, any signet on him. So what he's going to do is, what he's going to do is he's going to take the garment that has the broken piece of badge and put it on his shoulder so that it looks like it's around his neck, so that he doesn't get caught not wearing it. And what's the problem with that? As we know, he's not allowed to carry. And when you wear a garment thrown over your shoulder in a manner that's not the typical way to wear it, it's going to be it's going to be considered carrying. So if you take your talis, you throw it over your shoulder. You take your jacket, you throw it over your shoulder. That's carrying. It's not a normal way of wearing it. Somebody who walks out with his talis over his shoulder in a manner that's not the typical way to wear it, b'Shabbos chayiv. He's going to, not only is it prohibited, but it's chayiv. You actually carry it in a public domain. It counts as if you're carrying chayiv chatas. Said that the household of the Reish Galusa, in order to make sure that people knew that these people work for the Reish Galusa and that they are beholden for the Reish Galusa, all of them on their garments had a badge of the Reish Galusa. And so they weren't allowed to go out with it on Shabbos, because if it wasn't visible, they would pick up their garment, throw it over their shoulders so that everybody can see their badge. And that's carrying, because you're wearing the garment in an abnormal way over your shoulder. The Bar Minach, he said, besides for you, Rav China Bar Shela, because the Leikapti Allah, because they're not concerned with you, and if you are not wearing your badge, they're okay with it. And therefore, you're not going to come to throw your garment over your shoulder in order to show that you have the badge. And so you can walk out with it, because you're not going to throw your garment over your shoulder. But other people may not. And so we see that throwing the garment over the shoulder, like we said, like Rabbi Yochanan says, and what Shmuel's explaining here is that that is a concern with anyone that has a badge on the garment, and the wearing of the garment on the shoulder is an abnormal way. In an abnormal way of wearing it is carrying. So you can wear your garment, but you can't carry your garment. So if you took off your coat and you threw it over your shoulder, it's like carrying it over your arm. Of course, that's carrying. Gufa. So the Gemara is going to analyze.
It's significant, the fact that the Chachamim that goes on the owners, not on the Avadim. It sounds the whole conversation sounds like it's about what the Eved can and can't do, but really it's what the Balabais can tell the Eved to do.
No. Why? The Eved is obligated on Shabbos.
Don't go out in that anymore. They said don't go out. Okay, he won't go out.
Sorry?
The Chachamim said the Balabatim, listen, you can't have your Abadim going out with the talis with the choitam on it. So the Balabat says to the Eved, don't go out. They say you can't go out anymore. That from now on, leave that home when you go. If you have to go out, that's all. What's it got to do between the Chachamim and the Abadim?
Why? They're obligated in mitzvahs.
They're obligated in mitzvahs. So the Balabat says, don't go out anymore. Balabat is makpid on it. What are they going to do? They can't go out at all?
Correct.
So the Balabat says, I'm makpid. You can't wear your talis with. You have to wear your talis with the choitam. I don't care what the Chachamim say. Evan says, okay, so I won't go out at all.
So he can't go into Rosh Hashanah. Correct. He can't go out. You can't go out with this. So Gufa Amar Shmuel. So Shmuel said, we're going to analyze this statement. The Eved could go out with this symbol that he has on his garment, on his neck, but not on his garment. Tani Nami Hachi. So you have a brisa like that. An Eved could go out with the sign on his garment, but not on his neck, but not on his garment. For a minute, we have a contradiction. Cannot go out with the sign on his neck or on his garment. So what's the difference? In the first brisa, and Shmuel says the neck brace is okay to go out with, and the second brisa says that even that you can't go out with. And it says that both of them are not susceptible to tumah, whether it's on the neck or on the garment. It's not susceptible to tumah, and also not a bell on the neck. But a neck, a bell that's on the garment is permissible to go out with. And and both of the bells, regardless of what on the neck or on the garment, are susceptible to tumah. So what's going on here? Well, furthermore, it says, an animal may not walk out with a sign, this symbol, both on its neck or on the garment. So you add a nice drape over the horse to your coat of arms or whatever it is. If it's not sewn in, if it's just a symbol on it, so then you can't go out with that. Also not on a bell that it has on that blanket coat. And not a bell on the neck. And all of these are not susceptible to tumah. So what's the distinction between the two brises? And the Gemara later is going to analyze also these bells. What are the bells? So in regards to the neck brace, the Gemara says, it depends whether the servant made it for himself in order to show that people should do commerce with him, or then there's a chance he'll take it off and carry it, and so you can't go out with it. But if his master did it for him, so then he will not take it off. Both are talking about it were made by his master. And the distinction is it metal or is it earthenware? And the distinction is this: anything that the Rav is going to be concerned about or wants to make sure that he's wearing it, then he has to bring it back if it breaks. So then there's a concern that he's going to carry it when it breaks. The earthenware, as we mentioned when we started, those when they break, they're useless. And so if it breaks, he's just going to toss it right there. He's going to just drop it and move on. And so there's no concern he's going to carry it. Whereas in the metal, if it breaks, then he's going to carry it home because it needs to be repaired. So Dover Shah Makbet Olav Rabbi Yitzchak, he can't wear it because maybe it's going to break and he's going to carry it home. Dover Shah Makbet Olav, but somebody he doesn't care about, somebody is allowed to go out with it because if it breaks, he'll just drop it and it's not going to be a problem. Achanami Mistabra, and this is logical. Since we said they're both not susceptible to tumah, so we see that it's not an adornment. It's not a garment, even though that it's made of metal. It's not really for the beautification. It's not for the enhancement of the evet. If we're talking about metal, and therefore it's necessary to say it's not susceptible to tumah because it's talking about metal. So even though that it's metal, it's not susceptible to tumah because it's not made as a garment. It's not made as a vessel of beauty. And so it's not susceptible to tumah. But if it was made of earthenware, like we started off with at the beginning, that they were earthenware vessels, well, then why would we need to say that these are not susceptible to tumah? No earthenware vessels are susceptible to tumah in this case. If it's made of these clay, these vessels would be susceptible to tumah. These clay vessels would not be susceptible to tumah. They're not like proper earthenware vessels. These are kli adama. They're just dried mud, and as such are not susceptible to tumah even in any case. So I didn't have to tell you that this neck brace would not be susceptible to tumah. So we see from the fact that it says it's not susceptible to tumah, we're talking about the metal ring ones, and yet he's not allowed to go out with it, and the reason is because and yet it's not susceptible to tumah because it's not made as a beautification, and he's not allowed to go out with it because if it breaks, he does need to bring it back home because it's an expensive item. It's not just this clay piece that if it broke, you can toss it. So we saw that the ring around the neck and or the signet or the sign on the garment are not to be worn if they're metal, and if it's this clay, then it can be worn around the neck, but not on the garment. Amar Mar. Now we saw the Brisa further said in regards to these bells. Cannot go out with a neck belt. But a bell on the garment is permissible. So this bell on the neck, why can't you go out with that? Dilma mifsak, because perhaps it'll break. And then he'll bring it home because it's an important item. Well, then even the one on the garment as well. Maybe it's going to fall off, and he's going to come to bring it home. So that it should have the same concern. Why is there only concern on the neck and not on the garment? No, the distinction is that on the garment it was sewn in properly by an expert, and therefore we're not concerned that it's going to fall off. Whereas on the neck, we're concerned that it's going to fall off. Like Rav Huna Bar Yeshua said, "Koshu arug legazru." As we saw even in previous things, that in the jewelry that's attached to the tiara attached to the head, to the head net, any of these things that are actually attached, and we're not concerned you're gonna come to carry it, that you're allowed to wear. So the bell on the garment is usually attached well, so we're not concerned that you're going to carry it. But around the neck, it could fall off, and we're afraid that you're going to carry it.
Is it pashut that he's wearing a belt so it'll ring? Is it pashut that if he's wearing a belt, it'll ring?
We'll see in a moment that some of them did not have the clanger. What's the technical term for the
clapper?
What is the inside piece?
Clapper.
What is that?
A clapper. C-L-A-P-P-E-R.
The clapper. All right. So we'll see. We're talking about some of them with a clapper, without a clapper. Nevertheless, so it's not necessarily was made for making noise. It could be just sort of like a dog tag. It was a name tag of some sort. An animal should not walk out with a this let's call it a dog tag, but basically a neck brace that said and that told you who it belongs to, or on its garment. And also not a bell around its neck, and also not a bell on its garment. And neither of these are going to be susceptible to tumah. So the Gemara challenges, says, wait, a bell for an animal is not susceptible to tumah? Why is that? Have a contradiction. Zug shel behema tamea. The bell that of an animal is susceptible to tumah. And we turn to Nochas Amid Beis. V'shel deles tahara. A bell that was on the door and attached to the door is not susceptible to tumah, as we've seen earlier. The reason by the ring that it was attached to the door as a handle. Anything that's attached to the ground is not susceptible to tumah. As earth, the earth is not susceptible to tumah. So the house is not susceptible to tumah. The door attached to the house is not susceptible to tumah. And anything attached to the door, which is attached to the house, which is attached to the ground, is not susceptible to tumah. So the door handle, as we saw earlier, and here the door bell, they are not susceptible to tumah. However, the Gemara is going to say, if you took the bell off of the door to make it into a bell for an animal, now it's susceptible to tumah, as we saw earlier, and we'll see now again, that any item that was not susceptible to tumah by its designation. If you intend to change its designation, just the thought is going to make it susceptible to tumah. But a bell of an animal, which was susceptible to tumah because it was an independent vessel, and now you intend for it to be a part of the house, and in fact you even attached it to the house, but you didn't make a change to the bell itself. It is still susceptible to tumah, even though that it is now attached to the door, which is attached to the house, which is attached to the ground, and therefore shouldn't be susceptible to tumah. But since it was susceptible to tumah, and you did not make any active change, you have to do a creative change in the bell in order for it to no longer be susceptible to tumah. If you remember by the ring, we talked about whether widening it, but it still acts as a ring, is that a change in it or not? But it has to be a maisa, an action that you do to it in order to change it. Attaching it, affixing it to the door is not going to be enough. And therefore, even though you attach it to the door, since the bell is essentially the same, even if you attached it with screws, tamei, it remains susceptible to tumah. Because any intent can change something to become susceptible to tumah, but once it's susceptible to tumah, for it to lose its susceptibility, it's not going to lose its susceptibility to tumah, or even if it was tamei beforehand, as we saw earlier by the ring, it will not change unless you do an action that changes the structure of what it was. As we saw then was the classic case, somebody was making hides into leather, and at first was intending to make it into, let's say, a pocketbook. And at some point said, you know what, it's raining out, we need a rug, I'm just taking it home for a rug. That thought makes it susceptible to tumah because it is now a complete object. Even though it hasn't been cut, it's the way he's willing to use it as it is, it's going to be susceptible to tumah. Once it's been susceptible to tumah, now you say, you know what, the rain stopped, I don't need this rug anymore, I can go back to making it a pocketbook. It doesn't lose its susceptibility to tumah until you start cutting it, because that's a change in the item itself, and that's where this halakha is. So the same is going to be here. The bell is susceptible to tumah as an animal's bell, and now you want to affix it to the door. You made no change in the bell itself. So even though you attached it with screws to the door, and it's now attached to something that's attached to the ground, it's nevertheless still susceptible to tumah because you made no change to the bell itself. And in order to lose its susceptibility to tumah, it must be a change in the item itself. So the Gemara says, we now have a contradiction. In our brisa, it said that the bell of an animal is not susceptible to tumah, and here it says the bell of an animal is susceptible to tumah. It depends whether it has the clapper or not.
Why is the focus on tumah? What I was meant to ask before is, you're not allowed to make noise on Shabbos. You can't ring bells on Shabbos. So why is the focus on tumah, not on the fact that it's a noisemaker?
So the
Shabbos.
Yeah, the noisemaker may not be a problem in if you have a bell that's just walking of the and by chance it's making noise. When you intentionally make noise that could create music, that's where you have a derabanan, chachamim enacted not to make noise because you may come to tune your instrument or fix your instrument. But if it's just on the neck and it just happens to clang all as you go, that may not be a prohibition. In fact, this would be that indication. So the Gemara says, "La kasha ad isli imbel ad lesli imbel." So the Gemara says, "Manavshach." How do you interpret this? What's your understanding here? Manahu, is it a complete vessel? Afagav the lesli imbel. So then even if it has no clapper, it's a vessel. The bell is a vessel and therefore susceptible to tumah. Ilav manahu. And if it's not a vessel, all right, so imbal masu mashvile mana, would the clapper is going to make it a vessel? What's the distinction? So Gemara says, indeed, yes, the clapper is what's going to make it a vessel. In other words, it is what's going to define it as a nice adornment, a nice piece of jewelry. Could Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan? The Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani Amar Rabbi Yonasan Minayin lemashmiya kol bekli matris shehu tamei. How do we know that a vessel that makes sounds is susceptible to tumah on account of it being a noisemaker? Shenema, for it says kol dover asher yova be'esh to aviru be'esh. In the vessels of Midian, which needed to be kosher when from its non-kosher status, there it says any davar, which in the pshat means any item any vessel that goes through fire, the way to kosher it has to go through fire. But over there, it said davar instead of any kli. So that's telling us any dibur, anything, afilu dibur yava be'esh, that even something that's just for the sound it makes is also going to have the halacha of a vessel and requires the koshering. So we see that it gets a status of a vessel on account of its noise making. So the Gemara says, in regards to this bell around the neck or on the garment, that it counts as an adornment. It counts as a beautiful as a vessel. It has its status of a kli on account of it being a vessel that is for the beautification of the animal and not just a maser. It's not just something that it's carrying on account of whether it makes a sound or not. And that's also going to be the status of whether it's susceptible to tumah or not. So b'maya kimta with the leslie imbo. So how did you define this? You made the distinction of what's susceptible to tumah or not, and in this brisa of what it's allowed to carry or not, based on whether it has the clapper. Ema metzias. So look at the middle case where it says that the bell that a human's wearing, can't wear a bell around his neck. But if it's a bell on the garment, you are allowed to wear it. And but both are susceptible to tumah. Wait, you just said we're talking about that there's no clapper. Even the Leslie inmal. So if there's no clapper, mi makabli tumah. Why is it susceptible to tumah? We just went through saying that the clapper is what defines it as a vessel, on account of it that it makes a sound. And we see from the pasuk by the vessels of Midian that needed koshering, that anything that makes a sound is enough of a reason for it to be considered a vessel. And therefore it's susceptible to tumah on account of the clapper, and it's considered a jewelry. It's considered an adornment of the animal on account of that it makes the sound. Well, but you said, and the previous brisa said that you're not allowed to wear it, and it's not susceptible to tumah. It's talking about there's no clapper. But in that same brisa, it says that if it's around the neck of a human, it's not allowed to be worn. If it's on a garment, it is allowed to be worn, and either of them are susceptible to tumah. But you just told me we're talking about something that doesn't have a clapper. Even Leslie Himmel mi makabli tumah v'raminu ha'osa zagin l'machteshes u'la'arisa u'lametpachas ha'siparim u'lametpachas u'lametpachas svarim u'lametpachas tinokis. So anybody that makes bells for a machteshes, so when they would crush with a pestle mortar, they'd sometimes put spices with that. They would sometimes put a bell on it so that it would ring and make sound as they crushed it, because it would be good for the spices to hear the sounds. As the Gemara says in creases. Ula arisa for a child's crib. And for the garment around the Sefer Torah, they would have bells so that when they was carried to and from the shul, everybody would know and come. The children would come and learn. And also for the kerchiefs of children, so that you know where the children were. So yeshla and imbal tameim. If it has the clapper, it's susceptible to tumah. Einla and imbal taharin. If it doesn't have the clapper, it's not susceptible to tumah. So that concurs with the previous halacha that we said. But then the question is, so why are these bells that are on the garment or the neck of this human and not susceptible to tumah? Why are they both susceptible to tumah? If they're talking about it's not a clapper, and you're saying that our rice is talking about that there's no clapper. Nitlo in belein adain tumasan alein. If it was susceptible to tumah and the inbal was taken out, it's still going to be susceptible to tumah. Or as Rashi says, if it already contracted tumah, it's going to still be tumah, because it doesn't lose its status as a vessel by the inbal coming out, because it could be put back in, and we'll see, as we said before, that it has to be a significant change in the vessel in order for it to lose its susceptibility or its tumah. So Gemara says, "Hani mila betinuk de lekola avidale." Says, well, it depends on what the reason of the bell. Is the reason of the bell that you want to know where the child is, or on the garment of the Sefer Torah because you want to know when the Torah is being brought to the shul, or for on the mortar and pestle because you want the sound there? So if the clapper is not there, the entire purpose of the bell is gone, and therefore it's not a vessel anymore. Whereas or it wasn't a vessel to begin with. If it didn't have it, that's not what the purpose is. But by an adult, the bell is just a tachshit. It's just a piece of jewelry. Avogadol tachshitu lay. It's a piece of jewelry, and avogadol less lay imbel, and therefore, even if it doesn't have the clapper, it's going to count as a vessel. So, Michael, you asked this question at the beginning: is what is the main reason of the bell as a noisemaker? Well, it depends. So in a child, a bell that's on the neck of a child, on a garment of a child, that's made for the caretaker to know where that child is. So therefore, without a clapper, it doesn't count as a vessel. The ones on the cloth of the Sefer Torah, on the mantle of the Sefer Torah as well, it's there so that people know the Sefer Torah is coming. So it needs to have the clapper. If it didn't have the clapper, it wasn't a vessel. But on a human, it's not there as an adornment. It's not there as a noisemaker. It's there as a piece of jewelry. It's a pendant on a chain. It's its own piece of jewelry, and therefore, whether it has a clapper or not, it's still going to be a vessel and susceptible to.
It's interesting that they make mantles for Sefer Torah with bells on them.
As opposed to?
I'm just saying it's interesting. They do that. They put bells on the mantle of a Sefer Torah. There's very often there's bells.
Right, like the crowns that we have in Kesser and other places. Yeah. Yeah. That is a tradition to have a bell on the Sefer Torah. So now we're going to analyze this. We have these bells that we just said are made for the clapper. It's made for the noisemaker. It's on the garment of the Sefer Torah, the mantle of the Sefer Torah. It's on the garment of the child, and it's made for that clapper. But yet, if you took if it lost its clapper, it's still going to be susceptible to tumah. Gemara says, why? Amamar nitluin belein adain tumasan alein. The Gemara says, why? Lamai chazu. What use do you have of it? After all, it was made for the noise, and the clapper's gone. Yeah, because even anybody, it doesn't take a metal smith to put the clapper back in. Anybody can do that, and therefore, since even a commoner at home can put the clapper back in, it counts as really still a vessel. Massive Rava. So Rava challenged. We saw this earlier, that a vessel made of parts. What's the halacha? Hazug v'ha'imbal chibur. That a scissors, the two parts of a scissors, or the clapper inside a bell, they are a connection that counts as a solid connection. And if the tuma touches one part of the vessel, the other part of the vessel becomes tummy. As we saw then, a vessel cannot make another vessel tummy. So if they were considered two parts of the scissors, each one of the blades was considered a separate part. If some tuma touched one blade, the other blade would not become tummy because a vessel cannot make another vessel tummy. However, since they are counted as one, it's a good connection. So therefore, even if tuma touched one part, the other part became tummy. If you remember, we saw this about the question of whether in the ovens, these sections that were made for hot water or hot oil, whether those are connected to the oven or not. And the question was, is it susceptible to tuma as one, or are they two separate parts? So over here we have this question, and we say that the clapper and the bell are one. And if tuma touched the clapper, the bell is going to be tummy, or vice versa. Tuma touched the bell, the clapper is going to be tummy, because they're a connection. And if you tell me no, even if they're not connected, it's as if they're connected. Vitani will learn. Maspora shel parakim, a scissors that's made up of scissor, like we mentioned now, the scissors made up of two parts. V'izemel shel rehitni, or this blade on a plane that shaves down wood. Chibur l'tuma, it is a connection in regards to tuma when. It's a connection in regards to susceptibility of tumah, but not into its tahara process in getting spritz of the red heifer water. And the Gemara said earlier, and we saw with this question. Well, which one is it? Is it connected or is it not connected? If it's connected, then it should be susceptible to tumah together, for one from the other. And also, when you spritz on it, the mechatas, the red heifer water, it should purify it as one. And as long as it touched one part, the other part's tahor. And if you tell me they're not a connection, and therefore it cannot be connected, it cannot become purified, it cannot become tahor from the red heifer water by one of them getting spritzed on, well, then it shouldn't become susceptible to tumah. It shouldn't be contract tumah either that way. If it's a connection, even for the spritzing. And if it's not a connection, even for susceptibility to tumah. Rabbi said that the truth is, when they're being used as one, so you're using the scissors connected, so of course it's a connection, it's susceptible to tumah. You're using the plane with the blade in it, it's susceptible to tumah as one because they're functioning as a unit. But it's not during the work time. It's not susceptible to tumah as one. And so it's not a connection. Not susceptibility to tumah, and it's not a connection either for the spritzing. However, the Chachamim enacted and said, you know what? Even though that it's only a unit while you're using it as a unit, but once you're not using it, then the two parts are considered two separate things, and it's not susceptible to tumah as one. And if you touch one part, and if tumah touched one part of the scissors, the other part of the scissors are not susceptible to tumah, are not going to become tummy. The Chachamim enacted tumah in order that there be no confusion. Since 5 minutes ago it was susceptible to tumah as one, the Chachamim said now too it's going to be susceptible to tumah as one. And the inverse as well. They said you cannot, even while you're using it as a scissors as one, you cannot have the red heifer water spritz on it purify it, on account of that. If you weren't using it as one, then it would not work. And so therefore they said we don't let it work even when it is being used as one. And so in the bell as well, it should be susceptible to tumah as a unit when they're being used, and not as a unit when they're not being used. So we'll continue with the responses to this question of if we're talking about a bell that lost the clapper, how does one become susceptible to tumah with the other? As we see now that it's only susceptible to tumah when it is one. Tomorrow morning we'll continue with this discussion.